Okay, I will say a prayer for detachment. O God, my God, thou art my hope and my beloved, my highest aim and desire. With great humbleness and entire devotion, I pray to thee to make me a minaret of thy love in thy land, a lamp of thy knowledge among thy creatures, and a banner of divine bounty in thy dominion. Number me with such of thy servants as have detached themselves from everything but thee, have sanctified themselves from the transitory things of this world, and have freed themselves from the promotings of the voices of idle fancies. Let my heart be delighted with joy through the spirit of confirmation from thy kingdom, and brighten my eyes by beholding the host of divine assistance descending successively upon me from the kingdom of thine omnipotent glory. Thou art in truth the Almighty, the All Glorious, the All Powerful. Abdul Baha.
Beautiful, Sayyidi Jan. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, dear friends. So we are now going to get into our session for today. There we go. Just getting my organized. So dear friends, we are on part 9, okay, of our course on exploring the advent of divine justice. And in this sections, we're covering paragraphs 28 through 33. And 2 weeks ago, we attempted to get into it, but due to technical difficulties, we couldn't get very far. So we're going to start again, and hopefully we cover everything and it will be great. So in these paragraphs, the topics that are covered are appearance of the manifestations of God, as well as the maladies afflicting American society. Okay? So these are the topics that are covered in these paragraphs. And so I'll just lay out a short introduction to what these paragraphs are unveiling. And I will read this for you. It says, the beloved guardian Shoaib Effendi warns that the capacity, the spirit, the conduct, and high rank of the American believers, either individually or as a community, are not the typical characteristics of the people from which God has raised them. Sorry, just letting 2 people in. Such a distinction demonstrates the impact of the transmuting power of the revelation of Baha'u'llah on the lives and standards of those who have come under his banner. North America has been chosen as the cradle for the Baha'i administrative order to demonstrate this power. So here in this paragraph, it talks about a distinction needs to be laid out between the society and the Baha'is themselves, because of this transmuting power of the revelation of Baha'u'llah on the lives and standards of those who have come under his banner. So without any further ado, we're going to get into these paragraphs, okay? So let me select some readers for today. So Miss Kathy, all the way up in the north, you have our first paragraph, please.
Dearly beloved friends, great as is my love and admiration for you, convinced as I am of the paramount share which you can and will undoubtedly have in both the continental and international spheres of future Baha'i activity and service, I feel it nevertheless incumbent upon me to utter at this juncture a word of warning. The glowing tribute so repeatedly and deservedly paid to the capacity, the spirit, the conduct, and the high rank of the American believers, both individually and as an organic community, must under no circumstances be confounded with the characteristics and nature of the people from which God has raised them up. A sharp distinction between that community and that people must be made and resolutely and fearlessly upheld if we wish to give due recognition to the transmuting power of the faith of Baha'u'llah in its impacts on the lives and standards of those who have chosen to enlist under his banner. Otherwise, the supreme and distinguishing function of his revelation, which is none other than the calling into being of a new race of men, will remain wholly unrecognized and completely obscured.
Excellent reading, Miss Kathy. Beautiful. Moving on. And our next reader is Miss Darla Brown. You have the floor. Yes. Excellent. Thank you for offering. That was really good of you. And don't forget to unmute yourself, Miss Darla.
How often have the prophets of God, not accepting Baha'u'llah himself, have chosen to appear and deliver their message in countries and amidst peoples and races at a time when they were either fast declining or had already touched the lowest depths of moral and spiritual degradation. The appalling misery and wretchedness to which the Israelites had sunk under the debasing and tyrannical rule of the Pharaohs in the days preceding their exodus from Egypt under the leadership of Moses, the decline that had set in the religious, the spiritual, the cultural, and moral life of the Jewish people at the time of the appearance of Christ, the barbarous cruelty, the gross idolatry and immorality, which had for so long been the most distressing features of the tribes of Arabia and brought such shame upon them when Muhammad arose to proclaim his message in their midst. The indescribable state of decadence with its attendant corruption, confusion, intolerance, and oppression in both civil and religious life in Persia, so graphically portrayed by the pen of a considerable number of scholars, diplomats, and travelers at the hour of the revelation of Baha'u'llah, all demonstrate this basic and inescapable fact. To contend that the innate worthiness, the high moral standard, the political aptitude, and social attainments of any race or nation is a reason for the appearance in its midst of any of these divine luminaries would be an absolute perversion of historical facts and would amount to a complete repudiation of the undoubted interpretation placed upon them so clearly and emphatically by both Baha'u'llah and Abdul Wahab.
Awesome reading, Miss Darla. Great to have you. Thank you. Paragraph 30, let us have Miss Gabrielle McGuire all the way in Australia. Let's hear from you, Miss Gabrielle.
Paragraph 30. How great then must be the challenge to those who, belonging to such races and nations, and having responded to the call which these prophets have raised, to unreservedly recognize and courageously testify to this indubitable truth, that not by reason of any racial superiority, political capacity, or spiritual virtue, which a race or nation might possess, but rather as a direct consequence of its crying needs, its lamentable degeneracy, and irremediable perversity, has the prophet of God chosen to appear in its midst, and with it as a lever has lifted the entire human race to a higher and noble plane of life and conduct. For it is precisely under such circumstances and by such means that the prophets have, from time immemorial, chosen and were able to demonstrate their redemptive power to raise from the depths of abasement and of misery the people of their own race and nation, empowering them to transmit in turn to other races and nations the saving grace and the energizing influence of their revelation.
Awesome. Beautiful, Miss Gabrielle. Thank you so much. Moving on. Paragraph 31. Let us go to Don Erickson. You're up.
Sorry. In the light of this fundamental principle, it should always be borne in mind, nor can it be sufficiently emphasized, that the primary reason why the Bab and Baha'u'llah chose to appear in Persia and to make it the first repository of their revelation was because of all the peoples and nations of the civilized world, that race and nation had, as so often depicted by Abdu'l-Baha, sunk to such ignominious depths and manifested so great a perversity as to find no parallel among its contemporaries. For no more convincing proof could be adduced, demonstrating the regenerating spirit animating the revelations proclaimed by the Bab and Baha'u'llah than their power to transform what can be truly regarded as one of the most backwards, the most cowardly and perverse of peoples into a race of heroes, fit to effect in turn a similar revolution in the life of mankind. To have appeared among a race or nation which by its intrinsic worth and high attainments seemed to warrant the inestimable privilege of being made the receptacle of such a revelation, would, in the eyes of an unbelieving world, greatly reduce the efficacy of that message and detract from the self-sufficiency of its omnipotent power.
Very well read. Thank you, Don. Okay. Now we have Miss Donna Hunter.
The contrast so strikingly presented in the pages of Nabil's narrative between the heroism that immortalized the life and deeds of the Dawnbreakers and the degeneracy and cowardness of defamers and persecutors is in itself a most impressive testimony to the truth of the message of Him who have instilled such a spirit into the breast of His disciples. For any believer of that race to maintain that the excellence of his country and the innate nobility of his people were the fundamental reasons for its being singled out as the primary receptacle of the revelations of the Bab and Baha'u'llah would be untenable in the face of the overwhelming evidence afforded so convincingly by that narrative.
Beautiful. Very well read, Miss Donna. Let us go next to Miss Connie Moore. You're up, Miss Connie. You're muted, Miss Connie.
To a lesser degree, this principle must of necessity apply to the country which has vindicated its right to be regarded as the cradle of the world order of Baha'u'llah. So great a function, so noble a role, can be regarded as no less inferior to the part played by those immortal souls who, through their sublime renunciation and unparalleled deeds, have been responsible for the birth of the faith itself. Let not, therefore, those who are to participate so predominantly in the birth of that world civilization, which is the direct offspring of their faith, imagine for a moment that for some mysterious purpose or by any reason of inherent excellence or special merit, Baha'u'llah has chosen to confer upon their country and people so great and lasting a distinction.
Excellent. Very well read. Very powerful paragraph. Thank you, Ms. Connie. Okay. Let us go now. We have go to Miss Claudia. Would you like to read, Miss Claudia? You have the floor.
It is precisely by reason of the patent evils which, notwithstanding its other admittedly great characteristics and achievements, an excessive and binding materialism has unfortunately engendered within it that the author of their faith and the center of his covenant have singled it out to become the standard bearer of the new world order envisioned in their writings. It is by such means as this that Baha'u'llah can best demonstrate to a heedless generation his almighty power to raise up from the very midst of a people immersed in a sea of materialism, a prey to one of the most virulent and long-standing forms of racial prejudice, and notorious for its political corruption, lawlessness, and laxity in moral standards, men and women who, as time goes by, will increasingly exemplify those essential virtues of self-renunciation, of moral rectitude, of chastity, of indiscriminating fellowship, of holy discipline, and a spiritual insight that will fit them for the preponderating share they will have in calling into being that world order and that world civilization of which their country, no less than the entire human race, stands in desperate need.
Beautiful. Thank you, Miss Claudia. Very well read. And if you could finish this, the rest of the paragraph, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Clearly, theirs will be the duty and privilege in their capacity, first as the establishers of one of the most powerful pillars sustaining the edifice of the universal house of justice, and then as the champion builders of that new world order, that house is to be the nucleus and forerunner, to inculcate, demonstrate, and apply those twin and sorely needed principles of divine justice and order, principles to which the political corruption and moral license increasingly staining the society to which they belong offer so sad and striking a contrast.
Excellent. Thank you, Miss Claudia. Okay, so let's us now have one last reader. And Miss Hoda Hosseini is up. Yes, welcome, welcome. Good to have you. So
observations such as these, however distasteful and depressing they may be, should not in the least blind us to those virtues and qualities of high intelligence, of youthfulness, of unbounded initiative and enterprise which the nation as a whole so conspicuously displays, and which are being increasingly reflected by the community of the believers within it. Upon these virtues and qualities, no less than upon the elimination of the evils referred to, must depend to a very great extent the ability of that community to lay a firm foundation for the country's future role in ushering in the golden age of the cause of Baha'u'llah.
excellent. Very well read. Thank you, Hodija. So these were the paragraphs 28 through 33. Incredible. So I'm just now going to just recap very briefly as we scroll through, and then I'll get into the introduction and major key points, and then actually go through the lessons of all the paragraphs. But there was a lot of content in these paragraphs, so I'm just going to touch on them. So as you recall, in paragraph 17 of the Advent of Divine Justice, the beloved guardian 11 times gave out rhetorical questions. What other community has achieved what this community America has achieved? What other community So 11 rhetorical questions, one after another. And one of them was about the house of justice. What other community has done this? It was a pouring of love and appreciation to their steadfastness, obedience, stalwartness of this nascent and young fledgling community. But then in paragraph 28, what does he say? I have to issue a warning. This is in paragraph 28. Says, I have to, it is incumbent, I feel it nevertheless incumbent upon me to utter at this juncture a word of warning. And so what is this word of warning, the beloved guardian suddenly, after he's poured his whole heart and love to this continent, what does he say? He says, I have to lay it out that this community, this American Baha'i community, stands apart. There's a sharp distinction between this community and the wider community. So there has to be set that word of warning first and foremost out. And why is he doing that? Because there wouldn't be this transmuting power, this power of the revelation of Baha'u'llah, if it wasn't, there's a sharp distinction placed right there. So then the beloved guardian goes into paragraph 29 and 30 and 31. And what does he do here? He wants to show the power of the revelations of His Holiness Jesus Christ. He wants to show the power of the revelation of His Holiness Muhammad, as well as the power of the revelation of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, as they have effected a transformation in the character of the peoples at those points in times. So this is a very incredible thing. So he then lays out how these peoples were corrupt. They lived in laxity of morals, the same problems that we're living in today. And he's laying it out one after another. You can see it. We see in the moral life of the Jewish people at the time of the appearance of Jesus Christ. Barbarous cruelty, gross idolatry, immorality. Do you think in this day and age we don't have these things? Immorality, idolatry, same things we have in this world. Barbarous cruelty, we see it all over the planet. So these are still problems we are faced with. Decadence, attendant corruption, confusion, intolerance, oppression. And if you don't think don't have these problems, turn on the news, open a newspaper. We have all of these problems, and it's probably exacerbated in this day and age, magnified. So this is the beloved guardian talking about the parallels of past dispensations to the current one. And this is an incredible exposition as he's going through this. Then in paragraph 30, oh, I love this paragraph. Maybe one of my top 5 favorite paragraphs, whole Advent of Divine Justice. This is now where he's saying, why did he choose America? He could have, Abdul Baha could have chosen any place, but he chose America. But it's not because of its greatness. So this is where he lays it out, paragraph 30. So, and also in paragraph 32. But this is where he lays it out, real, very dire. He says it's not because of its greatness, however great it is. But what is it? It's because of its lamentable degeneracy. Lamentable. Do you know what lamentable means? Woeful, crying, wailing. I think of the people that are just beating their heads. Woeful, lamentable degeneracy. My dear Don, you are the great dictionary person. Look up these words for us as you have time. Lamentable degeneracy, irremediable, cannot be cured. So this is what irremediable means. It cannot be cured. Perversity. It means it's distortion. It's a waywardness. Perverse. They have gone off on a track that is an aberration of what is supposed to be happening. Perverse. It's a sickness. Cannot be cured. And so this is what this country is in. So this is why this country has been chosen. Then we go into paragraph 31. Now the beloved guardian says, in the light of this fundamental principle, it should always be borne in mind that these lights have come, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, to solve the problems of these countries that they have come. So to set this standard differently. And then 31 continues talking about how they have raised up a new race of men, these dawn breakers in their time and period. And I also want to highlight, this is the first time in the Advent of Divine Justice, it was in paragraph 28, that this term, a new race of men, comes. It comes again in paragraph 48. So why I point out this early on is because I'm going to touch on this, that this new term, new race of men, is something so unique to this dispensation. It is not just a transformation of our inner life and outer life. It is a transformation of even how we perceive our surroundings, that we see the evils in society. This is something that we have new eyes, we have new ears, we have new, even tangible hands in the sense to see and perceive the ills within our society, but we also have the prescription to go and make that transformation happen. So this is something I wanted to share. What is this new race of men that it talks about in paragraph 28? It really amplifies it in paragraph 48 when we get into a chaste and holy life. Because that is where now the beloved guardian is talking about how we should have this holy life, a transformative inner being to take on the challenges of corruption within our society. So,
Hey, son.
Yes, my dear Don.
Lamentable.
Yes.
Bad, unfortunate, deplorable, distressing, pitiful, and sorry.
Oh, there you go. Lamentable, deplorable, distressing. So this is the state of condition. Excellent, Don. And I appreciate you always jumping to finding all our definitions. So lamentable, woeful. So these are the definitions. Now, I just also want to highlight this one line because I love these. And as you beautifully, all of you were reading, it just jumped my heart. So this is in this paragraph 31. So this says here, midway down, it says the Bab and Baha'u'llah. So he's talking about the demonstrating the regenerating spirit, the animating power of this revelation proclaimed by the Bab and Baha'u'llah transforms what they can be truly regarded as one of the what? Most backward, most cowardly. And perverse of peoples into a race of heroes. So it's a complete transformation of character that is needed in this day and age. And this is the power of the revelation of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. This is the power of the revelation of all the manifestations to transform the hearts. So this is, and they appear in the most degenerate spots on the planet as a sign of the power of the transmuting power of their revelation. So, dear friends, I hope you're as excited as I am, as we're now going to get into our major key points. Dear Tesfaye, I'm happy to hear you. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I come late, so sorry. Now, I see that in slide number 7, as you read it right now.
Yes.
Okay, the first 2 lines that you see, it says, in the light of this fundamental principle, it should always be borne in mind, nor can it be sufficiently emphasized that the primary reason why the Bab and Baha'u'llah choose to appear in Persia and to make it the first repository of the revelation, is it their choice or God's choice? I don't understand what this sentence are put here.
Great question, Tesfaye. Thank you so much. Manifestations of God are like divine mirrors. They reflect perfectly the light of God in that sense. So when you say it's God's choice or the manifestation's choice, it's one and the same. So the choice here for choosing Persia for as the site and location for their revelations to appear is because of the degeneracy, the waywardness, the perversity and cowardliness of the peoples of Persia at that point in time. So this is, and if any of our dear Persians would say, with all their love and pride for the heritage of Iran and this is exactly as it is, okay? So that country had stooped to an absolute low, and this is why they have come, because of the degeneracy, perversity, and waywardness, the ignominious depths. Now, this isn't a word that I even pulled a definition of, for my dear Don doesn't have to pull it up, because I wanted you to see how far bottomed Persia had reached. And so this is why the two manifestations, actually technically three manifestations, had appeared with Zoroaster there too. So they had three manifestations. This is to a country that had reached an all-time low. Okay, so that's why I wanted to point this out. Excellent. We're
In relation to that, I have another question. Is that okay, or?
Okay, testify quickly because we have to move on. And then there was another question, please.
Because as I see, the whole religion, in the history of religion, most of the time, the manifestation of God is always selected or get from the Middle East area. What is there any wisdom, or what's the reason behind your knowledge?
Great question, testifier. The reason why the manifestations of God have appeared in certain areas is because, as mentioned, these areas have reached depths of degeneracy, lamentable perversity, and it's not that the manifestations of God have not appeared elsewhere. It's that the record of writing has not been kept up, okay? They have not had the ability. They may have appeared in Africa, India, who knows, in the South American countries, the Native Americans, the Aboriginal areas. I mean, it is written that every country, every part of humanity has had guidance. The Lord has not left humanity without guidance. It is only that these peoples have had script, they have had writing to record these, okay? So that is the difference, that the guidance have come and continued. But these points in this time, this place was at the bottom low, and the manifestations of God appeared there as a sign for transmuting the hearts of these people, which were so perverse. I appreciated that question. And one last point, dear Hoyajan has a hand up.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I joined at this point.
Please.
Because this is one of my most favorite parts of the Advent of Divine Justice. Because I'm honest, I often hear I live in the United States, and people and non-Iranians often express their dismay when they see the not so sterling behavior, attitude, action of the Iranian believers as it pertains to their responsibility in internalizing and promoting oneness, unity, racial justice, and all that. So, because we are told by the Guardian to weed out those tendencies inherited from our nation, how can we possibly think that we can weed out all these deficiencies which are here? Ignominious depths, perversity, where is it? All the negative qualities of the people of Iran at the time when the Bab and Baha'u'llah appeared. It's only 5 or 6 generations. So how could we think we'd be getting rid of those? So just because we are Iranian and we are come from the cradle of the faith does not mean in any way, shape, or form that we have by any means removed and weeded out those racial attitudes and tendencies which are terrible and extremely that negate the very faith that we call ourselves to be Baha'is.
Beautiful. Very well said, Hodajan. Excellent. Spot on. So yeah, we're just a few, as mentioned by Holy John, we're only a few generations really away from the history of when these manifestations of God appeared. It's not that long ago. And why did they appear there? It's because of their lamentable degeneracy. That's why they appeared there. And so, and we are descendants of those people, and as you all know, racism, all the problems are passed down from generation to generation. It's educationally taught from one generation to the next. So to say that I myself have not picked up the problems of my past generation would be, a false assumption. We have to work on ourselves. So I'm very excited, dear friends. Let us now get into our major key points for our session today. So, Mr. Pat, you are up. Let's get this going.
Okay. Major key points from paragraph 28 to 33. The manifestations of God always appear among people and races at the lowest depths of moral and spiritual degradation.
Pause right there, Pat. Always remember this. Always remember this. That's where they come. So any ever assumption that they come to a place where, oh, these people are okay. No, they come at the worst places. Excellent. Thank you.
The manifestations of God transform the selected people and societies to create the most advanced civilizations that then influence other races and nations.
Great. Keep going.
Moses came during a time of darkness when ignorance and childishness prevailed amongst the people, and they were waverers. When the Israelites lost the spirit of Judaism and became fanatical and disunited, His Holiness, Jesus Christ, appeared.
Beautiful. Keep going, Pat. You're doing great.
His Holiness Muhammad appeared among the savage tribes of Arabia and transformed them into a nation that became a great civilization. At the time of the advent of the Blessed Bab and His Holiness Baha'u'llah, Persia was a feeble and backward nation. The distinction conferred by Baha'u'llah on America is to demonstrate the transformative power of his revelation.
Awesome. Great reading, Pat. Okay, let us now rest your voice. Kayvon John, you're up. Go for it.
During his travels to Europe and the United States, His Holiness Abdu'l-Baha repeatedly talked about the excessive materialism affecting the world and its baneful consequences. Lawlessness and violence are dominant characteristics of American society.
Excellent. So these are two qualities that are actually characteristics of our society: lawlessness and violence. And I'll show you in upcoming slides how these are actually part of American society as we know it. So let's get into it. I'm so excited. So in paragraphs 29 through 31, the beloved guardian Shough Effendi explains that the manifestations of God always appear among peoples and races at their lowest depths of moral and spiritual degradation. Through their divine power, they transform the selected people and societies to create the most advanced civilizations of the time, which then influence other races and nations. Dear friends, in order to illustrate this concept, the beloved guardian briefly refers to the conditions of the people amidst whom Moses, Christ, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah appeared. And of course, dear friends, we could show the lives of His Holiness Buddha and Krishna and Zoroaster, and show how all of the time periods of all the manifestations of God, how they have had such a massive impact of transformation in those regions and places. So this is why they have come, for the transformation of the hearts, transformation of the peoples and nations in which they appear. So let us now have a reader. Sarah, would you like to read?
Sure, thank you. In paragraph 31, Shoghi Effendi emphasizes that the Bab and Baha'u'llah chose to appear in Persia because of all the peoples and nations of the civilized world. That race and nation had, as so often depicted by Abdul Baha, sunk to such ignominious depths and manifested so great a perversity as to find no parallel among its contemporaries. The power of revelations of the Bab and Baha'u'llah transformed the most backward, cowardly, and perverse people into a new race of heroes. May I ask a question?
Please, Sarah, go for it.
When was the word race actually brought into part of our civilization, our conversations?
Great question, Sarah. Hold that question. It's coming up in part 14.
Oh,
so
great.
Right now we're in part 9. So that will come up in our history aspect in part 14. So I'm not giving anything away yet.
Okay,
But
thank
it
you.
will come later. Now, back to our topic. Ignominious depths. This is actually how I would love the friends. You know, we memorize all these incredible quotes, dear friends. But this is also an incredible quote showing the perversity of the peoples of Persia. This is an incredible quote even to memorize in the sense of the backwardness, the degeneracy of Persian people. And why I think it's an interesting quote to memorize, because it shows the transmuting power of the revelation of Baha'u'llah. So what are these qualities that these people of Persia manifested at that time? It was, he said, manifested so great a perversity as to find no parallel amongst its contemporaries. So they were backward, they were cowardly, they were perverse. So this is, if we go to that section in paragraph 31, that's what I'm talking about, the area to remember, to memorize. It's where is the qualities of these people, and the transformative power of this revelation changed those qualities into a race of heroes. And in paragraph 28, it says a new race of men. So why I highlighted this word, because this is from the beloved garden, ignominious, causing or deserving or causing public disgrace or shame. Publicly disgrace or shame. Imagine that they reached such a disgrace. No one even wants to hold the name of Iranian or Persian, you know, and it's almost become something as an embarrassment, even in circles, that so these people don't even say I'm Iranian, I'm Persian, I'm not Iranian, I'm Persian, you know? So because it has become an embarrassment to be tied to that point in that time. It is an embarrassment. We rather associate with the Persian Empire than be associated with Iran. And how sad is that? Truly, how sad is that? So this is what I wanted to share with you, dear friends, you know. So now let us get into Moses. Now, the great lawgiver, Moses. My dear friend, Karen O'Brien, who I love always seeing her great posts on Facebook. So Miss Karen, you're up. You are muted, my dear Karen.
There we are. Okay. Moses. The term Israelite is a reference to the descendants of the patriarch Jacob. The patriarchs of the Bible are Abraham, his son Isaac, and the son of Isaac, Jacob. Jacob had 13 children, 12 sons, and 1 daughter. Through a chain of events in connection with one of his sons, Joseph, Jacob moved the entire family to Egypt, where the descendants settled and multiplied significantly. Threatened by the number of Israelites, the Pharaoh decided to deal with them harshly. Initially, he ordered the enslavement of the Israelites under extremely harsh conditions. According to the book of Exodus, the Egyptian masters treated the Israelites ruthlessly and made their lives bitter and miserable. Since the numbers of the Israelites continued to grow, even under oppression, the Pharaoh ordered that every newly born Hebrew boy be thrown into the river Nile.
Excellent. Thank you for reading. So they had a lot of children back then. That's one thing I got out of it. 13 children. You know, I'm having a child soon, and that'll be my third one, but 13 children, 12 sons and 1 daughter. So that is quite an ordeal, you know, in a test in itself. But then they went through another test. And what was this test? It was that the Israelites ruthlessly and made the Egyptian masters treated the Israelites ruthlessly. So these Egyptian masters treated them ruthlessly. So we're going to see this parallel through each one of these manifestations, the time periods of these dispensations. So this is actually, I found this, the reference in Exodus chapter 1, verse 21. Every Hebrew boy that is born, you must throw into the Nile. And then this is an artwork, incredible artwork. And this is by an artist named Eric Gabriel. And he used his great art skills. And it says the Pharaoh ordered every Hebrew boy thrown into the Nile. And this is how he depicted it, throwing the Hebrew boys into the Nile. What a tragedy. What a truly a persecution on these people. So we carry on. Let us hear from Tesfire. You're up. You have the floor. Please read.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Great, go for it.
His Holiness Abdul Baha explains, at a time when the Israelites had multiplied in Egypt and were spread throughout the whole country, the Coptic pharaohs of Egypt determined to strengthen and favor their own Coptic peoples and to degrade and dishonor the children of Israel, whom they regarded as foreigners. Over a long period of Israelites divided and scattered were captive in the hands of the tyrannical Copts and were scorned and dispensed by all, so that the meanest of the Copts would fairly persecute and lord it over the noblest of the Israelites. The enslavement, wretchedness, and helplessness of the Hebrews reached such a pitch that they were never day or night secure in their own persons, nor able to provide any defense for their wives and families against the tyranny of their pharaohic captors. Then their food was the fragments of their own broken hearts, and their drink a river of tears.
Excellent reading. Thank you, Tesfai. So this is from Abdul Baha's letter, The Secret of Divine Civilization, page 75. So as you can see, these pictures that I've selected, these are actually ancient artifacts of how they have depicted the slaves working in those scenes of slavery. And so that is, I actually found them, you know, and so this is per se, some people have even said, oh, the time period of Moses is made up. This is all fragmentary, there's not enough historical truths or whatever. But no, there is enough evidence that this has all happened. There is all depictions of all the slavery and persecution of these peoples. So this is, and even His Holiness Abdul Baha talked about them and the cruelties, the absolute cruelties. It touches my heart when it says their food was the river of tears. And we see this in the enslavement of peoples that came to this country, the African American peoples that came to this country. Their drink was a river of tears. So this is how I see Exodus. I found this beautiful image, and we'll have let us have Combis John. Are you with us, Combis John? Read this. This is from Exodus.
Yes, sir.
Please go for it.
The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land and land following with milk and honey.
Excellent. So what happened? That country of Egypt, the land of Israelites, had been reached a period of degeneracy, backwardness, persecution of the people of Israelites, the Hebrew people. So now the Lord is saying, I have come, I have heard you, I've heard your crying, I've heard your suffering at the hands of these slave drivers. So now I am going to free you from and send you to a land flowing with milk and honey. So don't worry about the milk in case you're lactose intolerant. That is just a reference of a place of heaven, a place of, awesomeness. That's really a place of relief. So carrying on. Now we're getting more. This is another quote from Abdu'l-Baha's The Secret of Divine Civilization. I'll read this one for you, dear friends. It says, the misery of the Israelites continued until suddenly, what happened? Moses, the all-beauteous, beheld the divine light streaming out of the blessed veil, the place that was holy ground, and heard the quickening voice of God as it spoke from the flame of that tree, neither of the east nor of the west. And he stood up in the full panoply of his universal prophethood. In the midst of the Israelites, he blazed out like a lamp of divine guidance. And by the light of salvation, he led that lost people out of the shadows of ignorance into knowledge and perfection. He gathered Israel's scattered tribes into the shelter of the unifying and universal word of God. And over the heights of union, he raised up the word of God. And over the heights of union, he raised up the banner of harmony, so that within a brief interval, those benighted souls became spiritually educated. And they who had been strangers to the truth rallied to the cause of the oneness of God and were delivered out of their wretchedness, their indigence, their incomprehension and captivity, and achieved a supreme degree of happiness and honor. I love these writings. So thoughts, anyone? Any thoughts as we're at this point? The transformative power of the manifestation of God touching these peoples. Any thoughts? Yes, no?
Ehsan John, may I make a comment here?
Of course, Dr. Bayat, please.
Earlier on, when we refer to the degeneracy of nations where manifestations come to, a comment was quite rightly made that it takes long time before people change. It's not that easy for those characteristics people change into what God wants them to be. So we leave the Persia and America for the time being behind, but let's just talk about the Israelites. For that purpose, Moses kept these people for 40 years in the Sinai deserts, wandering, going north, south, east, west. But if they had moved in any direction for a week, they would have reached the end of it. But the purpose of that was so that these people will be trained, habits of the past would go, and possibly this enslaved and the generation that was used to slavery died out, and the new generations were moved into the new land of milk and honey. Thank you.
Excellent point. Thank you, Dr. Bayat. So this is way before GPS. So these Israelites did not know where they were going. They were following Moses. And If they had known that Moses was taking them off on a course of 40 years of going up and down the mountains of a desert, I'm sure they would have, said, "Where are you taking me? What are you doing?" But really, what Moses' goal was to transform these people. It was a 40-year journey of transformation of the hearts of these peoples. That's what it was. It took that whole period to really, as in the last lines of this Secret of Divine Civilization, it says here, it says, as I read it one more time, to deliver out of their wretchedness, deliver out of their wretchedness. These people were in wretchedness, their indigence, their incomprehension, captivity, and achieved a supreme degree of happiness and honor. So they were not just captives in the sense of being enslaved to the Egyptians. They were captives of their own minds. They were indigent in their own and wretchedness in their own behaviors and lives. So His Holiness Moses took them out of that state, transformed that people. So he unified them, raised up the banner of harmony, so that within a brief interval, 40 years, wandering around in the desert, they were a transformed people. So you see, sometimes it's really hard what the manifestation of God does to a people. He really tests them. But that's what it took for those people to be transformed.
Can I say something, Ehsan John?
Please, please.
These manifestations of God might come to the worst of countries in the world, right? Worst of regions. But I also think they come because of the cry of help from some really good-hearted people. They come to give, they ask for guidance. These people have been praying for years. They've been praying for help. And these manifestations of God come to that land to help. That's why these Israelites were helped out of their wretchedness, because a lot of them were praying for salvation. Thank you.
I love that point, Dr. Satibaya. Thank you. And we see that reference here in Exodus. This is where he says, the Lord, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt, and what? I have heard them crying out. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers. So this is the Lord talking. I have heard them crying out. So great point, Dr. Satibaya. Absolutely spot on, as always. So they have heard the people crying out, and this is another reason why the manifestation appears. It's not just the degeneracy and wretchedness of the peoples of the time. It is also that the peoples have been praying, have been crying out to their Lord, "Oh Lord, help me. Oh Lord, help me." So this is the Lord answering their prayer. Great point. Thank you so much. So let us carry on. His Holiness Abdu'l-Baha explains, and this is in Abdu'l-Baha in London, a great, I urge you all to reread these compilations. Actually, it's a compilation of talks that he gave in London. This is what Abdu'l-Baha said. He says, Moses came during a time of darkness, when ignorance and childishness prevailed amongst the people, and they were waverers. Moses was the teacher of God. He gave the teachings of holiness and educated the Israelites. He raised up the people from their degradation and caused them to be highly honored. He taught them sciences and arts, trained them in civilization, and increased their human virtues. And my dear friend Don, can you see this definition as you are our dictionary scholar? Please go for it.
Darkness, the state or quality of being dark. The room was in total darkness. Absence or deficiency of light, the darkness of light, the darkness of night. Wickedness or evil. Satan, the prince of darkness. Obscurity, concealment. The darkness of the the darkness of the metaphor destroyed its effectiveness. Sorry,
Excellent.
my screen's not that good.
No, you read very well. Thank you, Don. So there's the quality of being dark, absence or deficiency of light, but really here it's wickedness or evil, obscurity, concealment. So this is there is a time period of wickedness and evil when ignorance and childishness prevailed amongst the people. And this is not the only time period this prevailed. We'll see again in the time period of Christ, again in the time period of Muhammad, again in the time period of His Holiness the Bab and Baha'u'llah. And this is an incredible section, paragraphs 28 through 33, where His Holiness the Beloved Guardian ties how this is one unfolding revelation, and that how the manifestations of God, one after another, has had the same, per se, experiences and sufferings, one after another. So,
Sam,
please testify.
I think here the way I see it is darkness, is in the absence of light most of the time, that I understand. And then darkness, you cannot move from place to place, but light is you can move it from place to place. That if you come to the dark house, if you bring light, you can make a light and you can remove the darkness, but you can't bring darkness into the house and move the light.
That's true. Excellent. Great point. You cannot move, at least we cannot see in the darkness without light, right?
Exactly.
So this was a time of darkness that Abdul Baha is saying. So there was no light. And we know that in the Bible, it says, God is what? God is light. And so this means it's a godless time. It is a godless time. And it is
That's
a
why
time,
the manifestation is come.
that is exactly right. Spot on, Tesfaye. Very well, very well. Your eyes are open. You're perceiving this very well. Excellent, very well. And so moving on, let us hear from Miss Deborah. Nice to see you always. Go for it.
In another talk, Abdu'l-Baha states, Moses, through the influence of his great mission, was instrumental in releasing the Israelites from a low state of debasement and humiliation, establishing them in a station of prestige and glorification, disciplining and educating them.
So again, this is reiteration of this is talking Abdu'l-Baha in London, right? So he's talking about how he's raised them up, transformed them, transmuted them, made them a new race of men. So now we move to His Holiness Jesus Christ. You see, all that was just Moses. Now we're reaching Jesus Christ, the Lord, so this is incredible. Now we're going to talk about His time period. It says, under the guidance received through the revelation of His Holiness Moses, the Israelites made significant progress in all aspects of civilization, to the point that they inspired the great philosophers of Greece, such as Pythagoras and Socrates, who developed many of the profoundest theories from the concepts of Israel's scholars and theologians. However, what happened? After reaching the peak of their civilization, the Israelites began little by little to forget the root principles of the Mosaic law and faith, to busy themselves with rites and ceremonials, and to show forth unbecoming conduct. That was from, again, Abdu'l-Baha's The Secret of Divine Civilization. So they started to forget little by little over the years, and started to focus and busy themselves with these rites and ceremonials. And we see that in the Bible, where it says, the letter killeth, but the spirit giveth life, right? So they were focusing on the letter and not the spirit. And so then they also were displaying this unbecoming conduct. So not truly of how to be this transformed new race of men that each one of these manifestations have come to bring about. So this is a long paragraph. I put this here because it's important. So I wanted, let's hear from someone. How about Miss Mary McGregor? I always enjoy hearing you. You have the spotlight. There you go.
Okay, make it a little bigger so I can see it.
There you go. There you go.
Okay. Jesus Christ. Abdu'l-Baha states that the Israelites forgot the meaning of the law of God, that they became involved in ignorant fanaticism and blameworthy practices such as insurgence and sedition. Their divines, having concluded that all those essential qualifications of humankind set forth in the holy book were by then a dead letter, began to think only of furthering their own selfish interests, and afflicted the people by allowing them to sink into the lowest depths of heedlessness and ignorance. And the fruit of their wrongdoing was this, that the old time glory, which had endured so long, now changed to degradation. And the rulers of Persia, of Greece, and of Rome took them over. The banners of their sovereignty were reversed. The ignorance, foolishness, abasement, and self-love of their religious leaders and their scholars were brought to light in the coming of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar, the
go.
king of Babylon, who destroyed them. After a general massacre and the sacking and razing of their houses and even the uprooting of their trees, he took captive whatever remnants his sword had spared and carried them off to Babylon. 70 years later, the descendants of these captives were released and went back to Jerusalem. Then Ezekiel and Ezra reestablished in their midst the fundamental principle of the holy book. And day by day, the Israelites advanced, and the morning brightness of their earlier ages dawned again. In a short time, however, great dissensions as to belief and conduct broke out anew. And again, the one concern of the Jewish doctors became the promotion of their own selfish purposes, and the reforms that had obtained in Ezra's time were changed to perversity and corruption. The situation worsened to such a degree that time and again the armies of the Republic of Rome and of its rulers conquered Israelite territory. Finally, the warlike Titus, commander of the Roman forces, trampled the Jewish homeland into dust, putting every man to the sword, taking the women and children captive, flattening their houses, tearing out their trees, burning their books, looting their treasures, and reducing Jerusalem and the temple to an ash heap. Abdu'l-Baha, The Secret of Divine Civilization, pages 78 to 79.
Very well read, Miss Mary. Long paragraph. Thank you so much. Great job. So here in this paragraph, this is from, as mentioned, The Secret of Divine Civilization. And why I tie all of these together is because I find it essential to really shine a light on the advent of divine justice in that paragraph where now the beloved guardian is talking about His Holiness Jesus Christ and how he has gone through the same sufferings as what happened with Moses, and as we'll see the same with Muhammad and then with Bab and Baha'u'llah. So this is now Abdu'l-Baha talking that the people of that point in time again fell into this ignorant fanaticism, blameworthy practices in insurgence and sedition. So this is the same type of stuff that His Holiness Moses had to go through. So, but at the end, we see the real depravity that they went through. They talks about here. They taking the women and children captive, flattening their houses, tearing even out the trees, burning their books, looting their treasures, reducing Jerusalem and the temple to an ash heap. Incredible. Really, what the peoples that Moses had worked on so hard, now they have reached again such a low. So here I just have a picture of some of these Pharisees, and these are the that pretty much gave His Holiness Jesus Christ a hard time in that point in time. So this is from the first chapter 1, Peter. And this is, he says, rescued from darkness. So this is from Colossians chapter 1, verse 13. And from the chapter 1, Peter, verses chapter 2, verse 9, it says, who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. So this is exactly, remember what Dr. Satibayat said? They have been calling the Lord. They have been calling the Lord, praying ardently. So, and the Lord have come to rescue them from this darkness. And he says, who has called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light. So I love this, even the imagery of it is beautiful, that the Lord is coming to help these peoples. So now we're into some answered questions. We're moving all over the place, right? Abdu'l-Baha's and Secret Divine Civilization, a little bit of here. Now we're in some answered questions. So I wanted to give you as full a picture, a compilation even, to really touch onto these paragraphs in Advent of Divine Justice. So let us now get into Dennis McGregor. You are up. Go for it.
Okay. At this time, His Holiness Jesus Christ appeared and, through an extraordinary power, abrogated the ancient Mosaic law and undertook to reform the morals of the people. He once again laid the foundation of eternal honor for the Israelites. Nay, he undertook to rehabilitate the fortunes of the entire human race and spread abroad teachings that were not reserved for Israel alone, but formed the basis for the universal happiness of human society.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So you can see the parallels as we're just going through one dispensation to the next of how they have been moving. And so the word rehabilitate implies to restore the good condition or to restore to a former privilege. That's what Abdu'l-Baha is saying here. So these manifestations of God worked tirelessly to rehabilitate the fortunes of the entire human race. So, dear friends, do not ever think that His Holiness Jesus Christ was just for the peoples of Israel, or that Moses was just for the peoples of that land. They were for all humanity when they appeared. It's just that's transportation as well as communication, and also the limited capacities of the peoples of their time and periods gave these poor manifestations such struggles and turmoils and torments. I mean, His Holiness Jesus Christ had a 3-year ministry. 3 years. So He just walks up and down the Sea of Galilee trying to teach, help these peoples. And eventually they crucified him. And who really recognized him? It was his disciples. And at the end of it, no one came to his aid or assistance. No one. And on the third day, it was a lady that was the one that resurrected his faith, Mary Magdalene. So really, after all his sufferings, all the sufferings of his Holiness Jesus Christ, and I urge you to also, as we're going through these, your homework, dear friends, is to study the lives of the manifestations. So that's your homework, dear friends. Study the lives of the manifestations. And then what exactly is your homework? To show the parallels of the sufferings of the manifestations. And through this, you will see that they are one and the same. This adds to your certitude. So if you ever had a question in your heart about Muhammad, or you had a question about His Holiness Jesus Christ's authenticity, you will see in your heart that they are one and the same. And it is a beautiful thing as we study the lives of the manifestations. So anyway, that is your homework.
Sam.
Please, Tesfaye.
When I see here the word what's called the rehabilitation, can you hear me?
Yes, of course. Go for it.
Okay, my screen is messed up here. So word rehabilitate, the way I see is to be a little, I just want to know the organic meaning of that, because to my knowledge, sometimes when I see, the dinosaurs, if you see, is this present day, because it's the fetus can't survive, he can't survive, that's why he disappeared. That means when he says that Jesus Christ to rehabilitate the human, all humanities, if somebody follow him, that can be survive, or if someone is not follow him, is not to be not survive, or what's the meaning of that?
So I'll just give, there's so many wonderful people in this audience that can answer this better than I can, but I'll just touch on this. My definition of rehabilitation is if you have been injured or in suffering, rehabilitate means to restore your abilities to what it was formerly been before your injury. To rehabilitate. There's a hospital, dear Tesfaye, in Houston called TEAR, the Texas Rehabilitation Center. And what they do is they work with you through physical therapies to bring your abilities up so that you will be able to walk again. There's speech pathology to be able to, you could talk again, so that you have your abilities that you had formerly. So the manifestations of God here are restoring the fortunes of the entire human race, so that they are becoming this new race of men. That this is where Moses raised the fortunes up. Now Jesus Christ again is trying to raise a fallen people. So this is rehabilitation. But in this sense, it's spiritual rehabilitation. Okay. Excellent. Very good. Moving on. Let us check our time. We got 10 minutes. So we got, let's see if we can finish Jesus Christ and even get into Muhammad. There we go. We just finished Jesus Christ. So that was efficient. So now we're getting into Muhammad. I hope everyone's enjoying it. I love seeing all your faces every week, and it's going to be great. So now we're getting into Muhammad. And I don't know if all of our friends are scholars of Islam, which you all should be. And we're going to actually get into a section where the Guardian in Advent of Divine Justice says you should be a scholar of Islam. So that's another one of your homeworks to study up on Islam. So this is where it talks about the pre-Islamic period in Arabia. And it is usually known as the era of, Dr. Bayat, can you help me with this pronunciation?
Jahiliyyah.
There you go. Much better than I would have said it. Thank you so much. Jahiliyyah. Jahiliyyah. Is that right, Dr. Bayat? One more time.
Jahiliyyah. That's correct.
Okay. So this means ignorance, okay? And this is an entire period of time pre-Islam. And you can look this up. I've researched on this. And it is a period that they say it is a period of ignorance in Islamic concept, and is referring to the period of time and state of affairs in Arabia before the advent of Islam in 610 CE. So that is based upon their calendar, CE. As our calendar is, the Baha'i calendar is BE, so this is, their calendar is CE, the Caliphate era. It is often translated as the age of ignorance, age of ignorance. This is, as Dr. Bayat said it, I'm not going to restate it and slaughter my pronunciation. So although Arabs were descendant from Ismail, the son of Abraham, polytheism and idolatry dominated their religious beliefs. So this is, if someone could read this down here, I appreciate it. Just go ahead, you have the floor. Any one of you just unmute yourself and go for it, as time is running out for today.
The pre-Islamic period in Arabia is usually known as the era of Jahiliyyah. Ignorance is an Islamic concept referring to the period of time and state of affairs in Arabia before the advent of Islam in 610 Christian era. It is often translated as the age of ignorance. Although Arabs were descendant from Ismail, the son of Abraham, polytheism and idolatry dominated their religious beliefs.
Excellent, very well, Dr. Satibait. And also, could you read this little one in the bottom right? That was what I was referring to. Thank you so much.
Jahiliyyah, literally ignorance, is an expression for the pagan practice of the days before Muhammad. Jahiliyyah denotes all those worldviews and ways of life that are based on rejection or disregard of so-called heavenly guidance communicated to mankind through the prophets of God. The attitude of treating human life, either wholly or partly, as independent of the directives of God. Ayami Jahiliyyah, or the days of ignorance, in the books of history indicate the period before Muhammad when the people in Arabia forgot the teachings of their prophets.
So there you go. Excellent. Very well read, Dr. Satibait. That's so why I underline that, forgot the teachings of their prophets, because that, dear friends, is the theme of these paragraphs. Each one of these dispensations, from his Moses to Jesus, now we're at Muhammad. Each one of these dispensations have what? Forgot the teachings of their prophets. And they have entered periods of degeneracy, perversity, and laxity of moral character. And so now let us get into maybe another slide on Muhammad. So let's have, let's see if who else is here. Miss Betty, can you read this one for us? Miss Betty, are you with us? If you are, unmute yourself and go for it. There you go.
I won't be able to. It's too small. I don't see well enough.
Okay, not at all. Thank you very much, Miss Betty. I appreciate you. Okay, how about Auntie Mahfash? Could you read this one for us? Unmute yourself and then go for it, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Auntie Mahfash, please.
Okay. Muhammad, during the pre-Islamic period, there was no political organization of any form in the Arabian Peninsula. There were a number of Arab tribes, and the chief of each tribe had ultimate authority. Since there was no government, there was no law or order. Continuous war between tribes was the core feature of Arabian society. Usury was widespread, and sometimes interest of 200 or 400% was charged. Drinking and gambling were major pastimes. Arabia was male-dominated society, and women had no status. A man could marry any number of women.
Thank you very much, Auntie Mafesh. Not a nice time period to live in was this time period of Jahiliya, pre-Islamic period. And so I put this depiction here of what usury is. This was illegal money lending. It's the practice of lending money at an exorbitant, very high interest rate. And it is generally done at a very, very high interest rate. And as here it says, 200 or 400% was charged. So this is the time period. Women had no rank, no status. A man could marry as many wives as he wanted. So this was the time period. There was no laws, no order, continuous war between tribes. This was the time that Muhammad appeared. So, dear friends, let us check our time. We have maybe one more slide. I'll read this one so you guys get a reprieve. In some answer questions, His Holiness Abdul Baha briefly describes the state of pre-Islamic Arabia. These Arab tribes were most barbarous and rapacious, and in comparison with them, the wild and fierce natives of America were the Platos of the age, for they did not bury their children alive, as these Arabs did their daughters, claiming this to be an act of honor and taking pride therein. Thus, many of the men would threaten their wives, saying, "If a daughter is born to you, I will kill you." Even to the present day, the Arabs dread having daughters. Moreover, one man could take 1,000 wives, and most husbands had more than 10 wives in their household. When these tribes waged war against each other, the victors would take captive the women and children of the vanquished, regard them as slaves, and engage in buying and selling them. If a man died and left behind 10 wives, the sons of these women would rush at each other's mothers, and as soon as one of them had thrown his mantle over the head of one of his stepmothers and claimed her as his lawful property, that unfortunate woman would become the captive and slave of her stepson, and the latter could do with her as he pleased. He could kill her, or shut her up in a pit, or beat, curse, and torment her day after day, until at last she perished. In all this he was, in accordance with the laws and customs of the Arabs, free to do as he pleased. So this was from His Holiness Abdul Baha in Some Answer Questions, describing this period of time before the coming of Muhammad. So, dear friends, we're going to close it right there. It's 8:30. So I just wanted to, now we have laid out some really interesting stuff, tying these revelations together. So we'll pause it right there on slide 30. We'll pick up next week. I hope you're enjoying it. It's very exciting. Any questions at this time?
These Arabian people, sir, that means they are pagan. They don't have any way to go. They don't have any Lord to believe. Or what kind of people, man?
Yeah, that's right, Tesfaye. It was really tough times. They don't have any laws. They didn't have any order. The women had no status.
What happened to the previous manifestation of God? It's not shining anything over there?
As you recall, dear Tesfaye, they forgot, completely forgot any aspect of the teaching of the manifestation. Kathleen has her hand up. Please, Kathleen, go for it.
Well, I just thought, like today, materialism, our animal nature, was the law of the land at that time. Revenge. So it was like unbridled egotism at that time, it seems. And women got the short end of the stick.
You're spot on. Absolutely, absolutely correct. Very good. Dear Don, you have your hand? Go for it.
A closing prayer, if you like.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so first of all, I just want to thank everybody being here with us tonight. Really been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it. And so let us have our closing prayer and wishing everyone a great week. Thank you.
Thank you.
O thou compassionate Lord, thou who art generous and able, we are servants of thine sheltered beneath thy providence. Cast thy glance of favor upon us. Give light to our eyes, hearing to our ears, and understanding and love to our hearts. Render our souls joyous and happy through thy glad tidings. O Lord, point out to us the pathway of thy kingdom and resuscitate all of us through the breath of the Holy Spirit. Bestow upon us life everlasting and confer upon us never-ending honor. Unify mankind and illumine the world of humanity. May we all follow thy pathway, long for thy good pleasure, and seek the mysteries of thy kingdom. O God, unite us and connect our hearts with thy indissoluble bond. Verily thou art the giver, thou art the kind one, and thou art the Almighty. Abdu'l-Baha.
Thank you, Ehsan John.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much,
Ehsan.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice
you.
presentation.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, all.
Aloha, aloha.
Thank you, Sanjan.